Hi, I'm Dr. Sonali, and we will be talking about the importance of the color in our life. We look at so many beautiful green plants around us, and their importance is to feed us. They carry out the process of photosynthesis and they almost provide the whole universe. So let's talk about the photosynthesis, a very quick review about important concepts of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis in, is important as it converts the light energy to the chemical energy of the food. Whatever sunlight falls over the plants, that is being converted into glucose, ATP, NADH. All these are nothing but the chemical energy. So the light reaction converts it into the ATP and NADPH. These NADP and ATP, they enter into the Kelvin cycle and they fix atmospheric carbon dioxide into sugars. Interesting, isn't it? So there are two major methods in the photosynthesis. First one is light dependent reaction or light reaction, and the second one is dark reaction, Kelvin cycle, or light independent reaction. Let's move further towards the journey of your photosynthesis. So what is photosynthesis? As its name indicates, photosynthesis is nothing but, I would say, it is made up of two words, a photo and synthesis. So photo is light and synthesis is synthesize the food, construct anything. So in the presence of sunlight, plants, they convert the atmospheric carbon dioxide and water from the soil and create the food, synthesize the food. And directly or indirectly, photosynthesis nourishes almost whole entire world. All the living beings depend upon the plants for their food, nutritional and energy requirements. As we know, on the basis of that, we can convert them in autotrophs and heterotrophs. So autotrophs are able to synthesize their food by themselves. They produce the food in presence of carbon dioxide and water, utilize the sunlight. So that is why they are called as the producers. Almost all the green plants having chlorophyll in them are considered as the photoautotrophs. Now, the second category is also present, which doesn't utilize the light, but can synthesize their food by themselves. Those we call it as chemoautotrophs. As its name indicates, they don't utilize light, but they are depending upon the chemicals. Which chemicals? So there are many sulfur-reducing bacteria. There are certain oil-eating bacteria. So all these organisms which depends upon some inorganic compounds or organic compounds for their nutritional requirements are considered as the chemoautotrophs. And the first one that we had talked about were the photoautotrophs because they use light and they use chemicals. Isn't it interesting? Further, the second category where we fall is heterotroph because we could not synthesize our food by ourselves, but we depend upon the plants for our food and nutritional requirements. So plants release oxygen, we inhale oxygen, we consume the plant products, and we break it down into simpler compounds. And in that process, what happens? This energy is released in the form of ATPs. ATPs are nothing but the high energy packets. So ATP is, if I write ATP, it is nothing but the energy currency of all the living beings. Like we exchange money and get something in return, similarly, the ATPs are the energy currency of all the cells. ATP is nothing but adenosine triphosphate, right? So that helps in the those are the energy packets you make in this. Now, photosynthesis, as we know, converts light energy to the chemical energy of the food. How does it happen? So, for that, they have a miraculous cell organelles, which we call it as the chloroplast. Now, what are chloroplasts? So, to understand chloroplasts, these are nothing but the factories of the photosynthesis, or we may call it as the site of photosynthesis. So, leaves, if you look at the cross section of this leaf, you will find out these kind of cells. So if you just, this is a leaf, if you just turn it, you take a cross section of this, you will find these kind of structure. If I just zoom this a little bit, you can see these are the layers. So if this is your leaf, so this is upper epidermis and this is lower epidermis. And between this, whatever is present is this portion, the mesophyll cells, right? So this is upper epidermis. This is what we call it as lower epidermis. And between them, you have these cells which contain chloroplast in large amount. And we call them as mesophills. Now, these are the veins. What is the purpose of vein? To provide the water. Like water is brought by the xylem through the roots, and then within the cells, it is being transported through the veins. Fine. Now at the lower epidermis, you have very specialized structures. We call them as stomata. Stomata are like, you must have seen the kidney beans. So if you put two kidney beans together, this forms a structure like this. So here you will have an aperture or a hole, and this hole we call it as the stomata. What are these two cells which control opening and closing of the stomata are called as guard cells, because they are guarding, they are controlling its opening and closing. Now, I will discuss it further why this closing and opening of stomata is required. Majorly, the stomata's main function is to exchange the gases. So it will intake carbon dioxide, and whatever oxygen is being produced by the plants will be released outside back to the atmosphere. So leaves are the major locations of photosynthesis, and their green color is due to the fact that they have a green pigment, which we call it as the chloroplast, and that is responsible to carry out the process of photosynthesis. And as you can see, each mesophyll cell contains so many chloroplasts inside that. So this is how let's try to understand the structure. You have a cell, plant cell. We know that plant cell contains a cell wall outside. So when you have a cell wall here, apart from that, as you can locate, these are various chloroplasts. How the chloroplast structure is. It has double membrane, outer membrane, and then you have the inner membrane. So this is what we call it as the outer membrane, and this one is the inner membrane. And between these two membranes, you have some space. Apart from that, this chloroplast contains so many the structures which we call it as the granum. So inside this liquid will be filled up this area, the whole vacant area that contains stroma. Don't get confused between the stroma and stomata. Stomata are the opening for exchanging the gas, and stroma is the liquid which has been filled up inside this chloroplast. Now, let's look at these structures. These are very interesting. If you pile up so many coins over each other, so you can make a stack of coins like this, right? So I have put one coin, then another. So this is how I can make a stack or a tower or a pile of the coins. Same thing occurs here. The single part of this is called as thylakoid. So this is the thylakoid. So many thylakoids, when they are piled up over each other, they form a structure which we call it as granum. So this is what we call it as granum. And when you have many granum, so when it is a plural number, it is called as grana. Now what happens? This chloroplast, as we can see here, so this is how, this is just the diagram so that you can understand how the structure is. While this is the electron micrograph picture where you can locate different parts of this. So you can see over here, this is the stroma part, as we can see, right? So this is how I would say this is the stroma part. Then this part is nothing but your grana, and they are interconnected with each other, right? So in addition to that, you will find that your DNA, some extra cellular DNAs are also found here. So that is a different thing that we will talk about later on. But yes, here the whole process of photosynthesis takes place. Thylakoids, inside the thylakoid membrane, your light reaction will take place, while in this stroma part, the dark reaction would take place, right? So there are two main processes, as we have seen earlier also. So now the chloroplasts, they are found mainly in the mesophyll cells. These are the mesophyll cells, and you can see here you may have almost 30 to 40 chloroplasts, right? So that they can carry out the process of photosynthesis. Now, if you look at the overall equation of photosynthesis, seems interesting, as we have seen that the carbon dioxide, from where does it come? From the atmosphere. Water comes from the soil through the root, light from the sun, and it synthesizes the food that we call it as glucose, or we may also refer this as chemical energy. Why I am referring food as a chemical energy? Because the energy is being stored within the bonds of the organic compound. In addition to that, the most important thing is release of oxygen. So this releases back to the atmosphere. And how it happens? The intake of carbon dioxide and exit of oxygen. Which is the organ, or which is the part of the plant cell responsible to carry out the process? If you can recall, yes, that is correct. That is stomata, isn't it? So that aperture is responsible for exchange of gases. So in light reaction, light falls over the thylakoid membrane that absorbs the light. Photolysis of water occurs here. It synthesizes ATP and NADH. So this ATP and NADH will synthesize here. They will be utilized in the Calvin cycle. Calvin cycle, where does it occur? In the stroma. And Calvin cycle synthesizes the sugars, or you may call it as the carbs, carbohydrates, food, glucose, right? So all sugars. So site of light reaction is thylakoid, while the site of dark cycle or the Calvin cycle is stroma. So these are very small points. If you understand the concepts properly, you will never get confused, and you will never forget this throughout your life. And you can apply this knowledge anywhere on any kind of questions. Now, this process is essential for us, for whole world, because plants, they give oxygen to us so that we can breathe, and they give food so that we can have certain energy in order to perform our different kind of tasks, right? Now, as I was mentioning, that there are two major types of major stages of photosynthesis. The one which we call it as the light reaction. In the light reaction is also called as the photo part. Now, why do we call it as photo part? Yes, because the light is involved here, isn't it? So this can only be happen during the daytime. right? Because it requires sunlight. So light reaction happens in the thylakoid. So its first thing will happen is it will split water molecule. The very first reaction of photosynthesis is photolysis of water. Now, why I'm calling it photolysis? So you see, again, I would say you don't need to memorize these words or just by heart these words. Just try to understand their meaning. You will never need to uh, by heart them. So see the photo is light, lysis is breakdown. So when in presence of light, your water molecule breaks down and releases oxygen. That's what we call it as the photolysis of water. In the process, what else will be released? So as if I write down the equation, H2O, when it breaks down, what will it form? It will form hydrogen, oxygen. So if you balance this, because the balanced, whenever we write down any chemical equation, it must be balanced. So this is how you can write it down. So this oxygen will be released back to the atmosphere. What happens to this? So this further breaks down into protons and electrons. And these protons and electrons are required by us because we have electron carriers, NADP, which gets, by accepting electrons, get converted into NADPH. ATPs will be formed by the adding of phosphate group through the process of phosphorylation. Phosphorylation is addition of phosphate. So here, as we have seen just now, that you have a plant cell. This is chloroplast. So this is your chloroplast. Now the light falls over the thylakoids. This is your thylakoid. In the thylakoid membrane, photolysis of water occurs. Water breaks down, releases oxygen. In the process, ATP and NADPH have formed. They will travel to the stroma. So this process occurs in stroma, where the Kelvin cycle, or I may call it as a dark reaction or light independent reaction, will take place, which fixes atmospheric carbon dioxide and converts it into sugars. Now, these are the precursors of sugars, which can be converted into any organic compounds in the further things, right? So this is an outline of the photosynthesis. In the next lecture, we will be understanding in detail about the photoreaction and the photo independent reaction, or light and the dark reaction. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching. Bye and take care.